What's going on, guys? Welcome to today's Collecting Keys Friday Focus. If this is your first time here, my name is Mike DeHaan, and I am the primary host of the Collecting Keys Real Estate Investing podcast. These Friday episodes, what we normally do is we dive into a question from a listener or a topic that we've kind of been thinking about over the last week or week and a bit. And for the sake of this episode, what I'm going to be doing is diving into my experience working with Alex Hormozi and acquisition.com, as I just wrapped up my year-long consulting session with them last week while I was in Las Vegas. So I'm going to dive into that a little bit. But first off, just in terms of the Friday focuses, this is going to be our last one of these that we do for a little while, primarily just because, we've been doing these multi-week episodes for a long time, for many, many years. I think when we first started the show back in October of 2021, we did one show a week for a year. Then we added on interviews. Then we added on these Friday episodes to basically just bring more listenership and more downloads and everything to the platform. But after having done them for so long, honestly, we kind of run out of stuff to talk about. And as we've gotten busier and busier with our real estate business, which is our primary focus, these ultimately turn into something that we are kind of rushing to squeeze in. I can't tell you how many of these I've done in a random hotel somewhere or in a super inconvenient location just because we needed to get it in and check the box. And so just to kind of ease that burden and to not continue to produce, content that we're not as excited about, we're just going to be taking a little pause from these for a little bit. So what I would prefer happen is if you guys had a topic that you wanted me to dive into on more of a monologue style episode, go ahead and just send me a DM on Instagram, Mike_invest, and just say, hey, I would love a short episode on this topic. And then we can either talk about it on the main show, or I can create one of these kind of just a bonus episode for you guys. But so just a little announcement there for that. The Tuesday episodes with me, Dan, and Dylan, and sometimes a guest will continue as we have been going. Those are really fun. Those are also very easy for us to do with the production team. And honestly, they're just a great excuse for Dan and I to just BS about stuff and talk to Dylan, who's become one of my really good friends. And so we'll keep doing that for a while. No changes there. We're just going to be going down to one episode a week for a little bit. All right. So regarding my time at Hormozi's office down in Las Vegas. First off, if you're unfamiliar with Alex Hormozi, I don't know, you're new to small business, I guess, go and look up his name. It's Hormozi. He's kind of the biggest small business influencer out there right now. He owns acquisition.com, which is a private equity company. Even if you've never heard his name before, I guarantee you that you have seen his content on different Instagram reels or things like that, because he's everywhere. He has a great podcast called The Game, and I'm a very big fan of his. I quote him a lot on the show. I use a lot of his methodologies in my business. I heavily credit his teachings and kind of the stuff that he preaches for a lot of the success I've had over the past couple of years as the market's gotten weird. And about a year ago, they started doing these workshops at their office, which I was one of the first people to apply for. And I went to the initial one over a year ago, and I've been working with them now for the past almost 12 full months. And it's been a really good experience. And so high level, basically how their sort of workshops work. They have their scaling workshop that they talk about on their podcast very heavily. It's $5,000. That's what I paid for. I think it's still that to go to it. You go to these things down in Las Vegas. It's 2 days. It's kind of general business stuff. I got a lot of value when I went to mine. I've heard people have more mixed things about it because if it's too general. You go to, there's 100 people. Alex and his wife, Layla, they come and they speak and you get to meet them. And there's I don't know, I would say 70% educational content and 30% fanfare that you get to see their office and meet Alex and Layla, right? There's definitely people that 100% went there just for that reason. But at the end of that, they upsell everyone to a level 2, which I know is kind of Guru 101, bad. But I will say that the way that they lead with value makes it very, very worthwhile to participate in that upsell if you are trying to grow your business. And so I bought into that. We paid $15,000 for it. And basically what it came with was 2 more workshops that were down there, and then a direct regular consultation with one of the leaders in their company. Basically, they work with you to analyze your company's constraints. They figure out who in their office is going to pair best with figuring out your constraints, and you connect with that person, and then you go down there for 2 additional sessions where you essentially create an entire game plan to figure out what you're going to do for your business to grow it. And kind of the whole thesis with the entire thing is that the companies that they have acquired as a private equity company, the ones that typically perform the best are the ones that they helped before they acquired them, usually through personal relationships. And so their thought was, what if instead of putting in this free time or like working in this funnel that we're kind of trying to pay for to get people to inquire out being acquired by them, right? They said, what if people just paid us? We taught them to be better business owners, and then we could identify the people that come through the funnel that way that are of interest to us, and then we could approach them, and they will, hopefully come in and be a better portfolio company for them because they already have crafted them with their systems that they do internal. Okay. It's a pretty brilliant model, honestly. And they are making a lot of money with it. Like if you look at the average person, but if you look at the size of their overall company, it is a relatively small line item. And I will say in now my 3 sessions down there and the year that I've been going down there, I've seen the reinvestment that they've done and the way that they've stepped up the game over those 3 sessions. They're doing some really great stuff. So, but what they do in this level 2, they call it, is they consult you as if you were a portfolio company, and they kind of guide you in the way that they would want you to do it if they were a part owner in your business. So, kind of gets in the weeds. It's very, very data driven. And when it comes to real estate wholesaling, a lot of the stuff that they do, that they talk about is kind of, I would honestly say hard to apply, just because a lot of their expertise revolves around online marketing, running a traditional kind of like sales business, right? Where you are tracking the people that show up to your calls, very high conversation rate style of businesses. And then when it comes to real estate wholesaling or flipping, it's a little bit different, right? We're mostly hunting whales. It's fewer conversations, higher cost per lead, higher cost per conversion. But the thing that they do like about wholesaling is it is very, very profitable compared to someone that's selling widgets, right? And so just take that with a grain of salt if you do go and delve into any of their content or you do any of their workshops. When it comes to these real estate direct sell businesses, it is a little bit more, I would say, like fringe, but there is a lot of stuff that is applicable, especially if you are a business owner just trying to grow. And so over my sessions with them, when I first started going, a lot of my focus was around growing Collecting Keys and our scale community. And at that point, Dan and I, we were growing a franchise. We had a marketing company. We had all this different stuff that we were doing. And we felt like Collecting Keys was going to be the top of funnel that was going to bring things to all these businesses. We had shared team. We're going to offer all these services. And from kind of the get-go, when I went to the first scaling workshop back in June of 2024, they had a lot of skepticism around that and basically went on, you're doing too much. I did the classic entrepreneur thing and I was like, you just don't fully understand. I'm smarter than you. I'm in my industry. And so I kind of ignored them. And then when I signed up for the level 2 and I went back for my first session down there, that was like the deep dive session, which was it was in September. So it had been about 4 months after I went to the first one. And they went through mathematically what I was doing and why it was stupid. That was when I really started to realize the value of being around more seasoned entrepreneurs. And so after my first session back down there in September of 24, that was when Dan and I actually shut down a lot of the stuff we were working on. You've heard us talk about this on the show probably, but we shut down our franchise. We shut down our partnership program that we used to talk about. We sold Simply Leads, which was our marketing company, and we kind of stopped promoting scale at such a high level and instead do it more like a referral-based thing, or like just for people who are like looking to grow their businesses a little bit more seriously and less like making it a guru mentorship program. And instead decided to focus explicitly on our backyard home buyers wholesaling and flipping business. Okay. And the reason that we did that was working with my guy that was my connection down there. He mathematically helped me forecast what the financial growth was going to be with like comparing what our local wholesaling and flipping business that we were running, what that was going to produce versus this franchise model and how we were planning to monetize that. And ultimately the equivalent was going to be if I stood up my own wholesale business in, I think it was 4 markets that they said, that was going to be the same as if I had 80 franchises. And it came down to that, would I rather have, 4x of my local business, or would I rather have 80 franchises? And that was a pretty easy decision for me to make, because babysitting 80 franchisees who don't really know what the hell they're doing did not sound my idea of a good time if that was how little money I was going to make, big picture, okay? Not that I make like a little bit of money, but it was just a lot more work for a result that was already a lot more achievable, that was right in front of me, because I have been doing the wholesaling and flipping game for a long time and I already know how to grow that. And so when I got back from the first one, Dan and I, we made the decision to throw away over $250,000 of investment that we had made between starting up the franchise and running ads for all the different businesses that we were promoting. And we instead said, we're going to just end that and we're going to shift our entire focus, both monetary and energy, towards our local company. And that's what we've done. And so now within our local backyard home buyers business, that's been our focus since, I guess, October of last year. We're exclusively focusing on wholesaling and flipping. And then we have our lending business, which is coming in as basically an additional product for our buyers and for other investors in the space. And those really are more in tangent because you kind of like leverage the transactions on both sides to support each other as a business. And you're not trying to like upsell people on things. Okay. And they are also very like linked just in the way that the pipeline sort of comes through, and you're not kind of like stretching, trying to sell a buyer that's buying one of your wholesale deals on mentorship or on a, marketing platform when they don't even know if they want that. But you know that pretty much every buyer that comes in, they need money. Okay. And so the lending's very easy with that. And so that's what we've been doing for most of the year. And so now going back for my second time this past week, it was a much more constructive conversation because I had a lot more clear direction of what our business was going to look like. And so first off, I got a lot more out of it in terms of just like the more general material because I was actually able to prepare effectively because I didn't have 85 things that I was trying to prioritize at the same time at a single focus. But also too, the consultation that I got was very, very specific because we now had one singular focus. And so when it comes to real estate, it's kind of interesting because like I said, the teachings that they kind of do, they focus a lot on like online marketing and different things, which we don't do a lot of. We do a lot of direct mail. But fundamentally, they do like real estate wholesaling specifically because it is a marketing sales heavy business that does typically have a high return on ad spend. Our return on ad spend is about 7x. But they don't like house flipping like at all. Basically, their view on house flipping is that it is a low velocity of money, high risk business that leaves you open to risk in a bunch of different ways. Whether that's like physical risk, like something happened to the house that's cost you money. Whether it's market risk, like the market turning over, you're not being able to find a buyer, right? Whether it's liability risk, like a contractor hurting themselves on site and suing you, right? There's so many different ways that a house flip can go sideways. And from their perspective, to do all that work and only to make, $40,000 or $50,000, they're like, why would you ever do that when instead you could wholesale a house, let somebody else that's kind of an amateur do the flip, and you can make sure less money, but in a much faster time frame with way less risk. Okay. And so I tend to align with that. If you listen to me at all on this show, you've probably heard me talk about that a lot. And so I did appreciate that we kind of started that way and we moved that way for most of the conversation. When we were going through kind of the ways that they suggested that we scale the business, they basically said there's kind of two options, right? Which, this will all make sense too. One is that you get really, really good in a market and basically you try to squeeze as much juice out of the stone as you can. And this is kind of the traditional model that most wholesalers, this is what our main competitor here does, right? So you get really good at being the local home buyer. You're the easy option for them, for everyone locally, and you run direct mail. You get started with media advertising. You throw out billboards, you start a local cold calling team. You start running meetups to get referrals, right? You become like a very, very strong local brand that everyone knows. You go on the TV, right? You do all that sort of stuff. And then what you do is you just really try to squeeze as much as you can out of a market. What ultimately tends to happen, and I've been on this path already before, is you spend more money, advertise at the same people, because unless you're in a very large market, you kind of like run out of people to advertise to, like honestly. And so what happens is you start having more and more waste in your marketing system. You start spending more money per lead, more money per deal, and sure, your revenue and profit continue to grow. It just becomes more inefficient, right? There's nothing wrong with that model. You can still do very well making a good living, but it comes with just kind of like general challenges with growth and waste, again, unless you're in like a really large market that has millions and millions of people, in which case take a long time to get there. The other option is that you get really good at one type of system or one type of marketing and you copy and paste that in different places. And so that can be, one marketing system such as direct mail or cold calling or whatever. That can be in terms of like one kind of deal. A lot of people were doing this with Sub 2 back in the day. And you kind of become a little bit more location independent, or at least you focus on a couple specific locations where you can copy and paste what you already know is working in your own market, right? And so this is very similar to what we try to do with our partnership program, where we were taking this these direct mail strategies and place it in a bunch of different markets. And then we would have a local partner on the ground. And then our whole thing with them was they were paying us basically a fee to work with us. And then we would get a cut of all the deals and they were responsible for closing things. The challenge with this model is you have to have the local contacts. You have to find the local buyers. You have to keep a touch on the local market and everything else. You have to learn the local market. There's a lot of other challenges with this. So on the local market side, right, if you're trying to grow with that, where having all the different marketing channels, the challenge becomes that you get a reduction in opportunities, right, for houses. Honestly, you get a reduction in what is realistically the procurement of your product. The sale in a real estate wholesaling company, your customer is your buyer. You doing the acquisitions, finding the houses is kind of your procurement of product. It's not that different from like going to China to find the best shoe manufacturer. So that becomes a challenge, is your procurement becomes tighter. And then if you go to a new market, what becomes a challenge is your disposition becomes harder, right? Your actual sales. Find the people to be able to monetize or understanding how to best monetize the opportunities that you do find. And so there's no right or wrong answer based on what you decide to do, but it's important just to understand the nuances of those. And so they kind of like help line those out and figure out what each of those would look like, depending on which one we decide to pursue. I'm not entirely sure which one we're going to do yet. I do have a idea, but I'll save that talk about another time as we kind of decide on that a little bit more formally. But as we're going through that, they were able to kind of financially project what each would look like, what our org chart would need to look like to do each one, what our systems would need to look like to do each one. And it was very, very helpful overall conversation. One of the main things that they highly suggested focusing on, which makes a lot of sense as well, is around building as strong of a buyer's list as you can and nurturing buyers so that you become the preferred choice for their source of deals. Okay. And so they gave me a whole playbook around how to find buyers, how to nurture buyers, how to like run, I would say like nurturing campaigns and, different marketing with buyers to stay top of mind with them. I got like a whole 20 little slide playbook around how they suggest that we do that. And it's not unsimilar from having like an email list, right? If you have like a product. The challenge with it is you don't have something to sell people all the time, but when it comes to finding buyers for wholesale deals, it's not like undifferent from finding sellers, where a lot of the business is just being the person that is in front of them when they need to buy another house, right? When the most recent project is sold, when they just accepted an offer on their other one, when they got inspired by something, they decide they're going to need to buy more properties, they want to scale up. You want to be the wholesaler that's in front of them, that's bringing them the best deals. And so we spent a lot of time kind of talking about that process and what that would look like. So that will definitely become a focus of ours, regardless of which direction we decide to go on the acquisition side and the growth side. And that was a big focus. And then the last thing that we spent a lot of time talking about was specifically around the systemization on the sales and the buyer nurturing. And so they have a whole bunch of different processes that they use regarding hiring, regarding training, regarding processizing everything. And they asked us not to share everything. It's a friend DA, so I'm not going to go too much into details. But I will say, if you listen to the Alex Hormozi podcast that came out last week, it was titled something like "Why Your Team Isn't like Performing" or "Why Your Team Isn't Listening to You." It does have a lot of the same general information, just without the step-by-steps. I highly recommend you listen to that episode if you were trying to figure out how to hire and run your team better, because there is a lot of great knowledge in there that's very similar to the information that I got. Okay. So I know if there are a lot of you, this is kind of like a longer Friday focus for us, but my main takeaway with a lot of this stuff, it's kind of funny because I've been an entrepreneur now for 7 years, and there's when it comes to small business, when you get to big business, I don't know what that looks like. I haven't run like a big business yet where I'm getting to, 10, 20, 50 million plus, right? You kind of know everything, honestly. But there is we all experience this. When you know something, but you get framed it in a different way or by someone that you have a lot of respect for, sometimes it means more than when you read about it or you think about it yourself. And I think some of the best value that comes from being a part of something like these acquisition.com workshops is that you get told something by someone that has absolute confidence because they have been there so many times before, and you very well believe that they know what they're talking about. And sometimes just doing that and getting it framed in a way where they're giving you literal direction and not just kind of like theoretical direction, right? But they're literally saying, do this, do this, do this, do this. It makes it so much easier to have confidence in making big decisions. And for me, that experience alone was more than worth the money that I paid to go and attend these things, right? Which realistically over the course of like flights and everything else is probably close to $20,000 just for the level 2. But the value that I've gotten from it has vastly surpassed that. Also, too, just being around like an organization that really does run at such a high level, like they've completely changed my view about what a good company looks like and what a good team looks like. Like every single person that runs that workshop has sold businesses for multi-7 figures, right? Like none of them need to work there. They've all done very well for themselves. They're there because they want to be the best. They want to do something bigger. And to see a team that is built by people like that, by people that are re-entering the workforce, is very, very inspiring. And then you realize very quickly how poor of operators even some of the most successful people that you probably know are, right? And that alone sort of like reframes my view about what it takes to actually be successful. I've come back from every one of these with a new focus, with a new set of respect for what successful business actually is. And I would say it really helps me alleviate any like shiny object syndrome or anything weird that I'm currently dealing with, just because I was just around people that are doing the most basic, boring stuff at a very high level, and they're absolutely crushing it. So all in all, if you guys are curious about the workshops and you're a fan of his stuff, I recommend going to the scaling workshop. I do think it's a cool experience and there's a lot you can gain from it. Regarding the level 2, if you're like a small business in the real estate space, probably don't do it until you're like in more of like a CEO role and you're really trying to scale. But either way, like it's kind of your choice. I think that if you're an aspiring entrepreneur who values business education and not like just like mindset shit, whatever the fuck other, business coaches try to like tell you need, which isn't true. We need to know kind of what to do if you're an actionable person, right? If you value that sort of stuff, there is a ton of things like of experience that you can gain from going to these workshops. Now check it out. So anyways, guys, I've talked for long enough, 22 minutes. Jesus Christ, that's way too long, one of these, but it is the last one. So that's just fine. You guys can deal with it. But anyways, go ahead and shoot me a message on Instagram. Let me know what you think at Mike_invests. And keep listening, guys. We appreciate it. Share these episodes with anyone you can. It helps us continue to grow. And I'll see you guys on the Tuesday episode this next week. So thanks, everybody. We'll talk to you guys next time.